President of the United States and
All right.
President of the French Republic.
Here they go. Let's listen in. This is at the East Room of the White House.
Please have a seat. Good afternoon. Bon après-midi. Again, it's a great honor to welcome my friend and partner, President Hollande, back to the White House for this state visit. It is always a pleasure to host François. At Camp David 2 years ago, I was trying to make the summit casual, and François, in true French style, showed up in a necktie. We tried to get him to take it off. When I hosted him in Chicago for the NATO summit, I thought he'd try some of our local cuisine, a Chicago-style hot dog. I'm not sure he had one, but we do know that he's sampled American fast food in the past, because this happens to be the 40th anniversary of François' first trip to America as a student. And I understand he traveled across our country studying the fast food industry. So if back in 1974 you noticed a French guy poking around your local McDonald's, that was him. Now he's back as the 24th President of France, and Michelle and I look forward to hosting him tonight at a state dinner with a different kind of American cuisine. Alex de Tocqueville, that great son of France who chronicled our American democracy, wrote that even as we marvel at our freedom, there's nothing harder than learning how to use our freedom. It's a lesson that our two countries have learned over more than 200 years. Standing together and using our freedom to improve the lives of not only our citizens but people around the world is what makes France not only America's oldest ally but also one of our closest allies. Our military and intelligence personnel cooperate every day, keeping our nation secure and dealing with crises and challenges from Africa to the Persian Gulf. Our diplomats work side by side to help resolve conflicts and promote peace from Syria to Iran. Our development experts help impoverished villages boost their agriculture and lift themselves out of poverty. And this level of partnership across so many areas would have been unimaginable even a decade ago. But it's a testament to how our two nations have worked to transform our alliance, and I want to salute President Hollande for carrying this work forward. François, you haven't just spoken eloquently about France's determination to meet its responsibilities as a global leader. You've also acted. From Mali and the Central African Republic to Syria and Iran, you've shown courage and resolve. And I want to thank you for your leadership and for being such a strong partner to the United States. And in that spirit, I'm grateful for the progress that we've made today in 4 key areas. First, we're standing shoulder to shoulder on the key challenges to global security. Our unity with our P5+1 partners, backed with strong sanctions, has succeeded in halting and rolling back key parts of the Iranian nuclear program. We agree that next week's talks in Vienna will be an opportunity for Iran to show that it is serious about a comprehensive solution that assures the world that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes only. President Hollande and I agree on the need to continue enforcing existing sanctions, even as we believe that new sanctions during these negotiations would endanger the possibility of a diplomatic solution. And we remain absolutely united on our ultimate goal, which is preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Just as our unity on Syria and the credible threat of force led to a plan for destroying Syria's chemical weapons, we're united on what needs to happen next there. Syria must meet its commitments, and Russia has a responsibility to ensure that Syria complies. And as talks continue in Geneva, we'll continue to strengthen the moderate opposition, and we call on the international community to stem the flow of foreign fighters into Syria. This week, we're working with our Security Council partners to call for an end to indiscriminate attacks on civilians and to ensure humanitarian aid workers have unimpeded access to Syrians in need. And we'll continue to work with France and others to bolster our partners in the region, including Lebanon. More broadly, as Israelis and Palestinians move forward with talks, we agree that France and the European Union will have an important role in supporting a final agreement. And we also agreed to continue our cooperation on Mali and the Central African Republic, where leaders and communities need to show the courage to resist further violence and to pursue reconciliation. Second key area. As major trading partners, we're working to boost exports and create jobs. I'm pleased to announce that we're launching a new economic dialogue to expand trade, increase the competitiveness of our businesses, spur innovation, and encourage new entrepreneurs. And President Hollande's visit to Silicon Valley this week underscores our commitment to new collaborations in science and technology. Related to this, we've agreed to continue pursuing an ambitious and comprehensive transatlantic trade and investment partnership. I want to thank President Hollande for his commitment to these negotiations. We need to get this done because an agreement could increase exports by tens of billions of dollars, support hundreds of thousands of additional jobs both in the United States and the European Union, and promote growth on both sides of the Atlantic. Number three, we've agreed to keep expanding the cooperation and clean energy partnerships that make our countries leaders in the fight against climate change. And even as we take steps at home to reduce carbon emissions, we'll work to help developing countries move to low-carbon growth. And next year's climate conference in France will be an opportunity to forge a strong global agreement that reduces greenhouse gas emissions through concrete actions. And finally, we're moving forward together on key global development initiatives. The food security and nutrition that can lift 50 million Africans out of poverty, our determination to replenish the global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And I'm pleased that we're joining with partners around the world on a new global health security effort to combat infectious diseases and save lives. So this is just some of the progress we're making together, using our freedoms, to borrow de Tocqueville's words, to advance security, prosperity, and human dignity around the world. And François, in this work, I could not be more grateful for your partnership and your friendship. I especially want to thank you for honoring our D-Day veterans today. And I'm very pleased to announce that I have accepted François' invitation and will travel to France in June to mark the 70th anniversary of D-Day. I was there for the 65th anniversary, and it was an extraordinary experience. I'm looking forward to returning to honor our remarkable veterans and to reaffirm this extraordinary alliance. President Hollande.
Mr. President, dear Barack, you receive me today as you had done the day after my election, with the same sincerity, with the same respect, and with the same friendship for France. You didn't know me back then. I knew you. There was a major difference there between us, because your election had been welcome in France beyond any political views, for it was a proof that America was moving forward once more. America was
capable of making it possible, always possible. I'm speaking about progress. So when you welcomed me, this was in Camp David. I'm not going to talk about the tie I was wearing then, and I'm wearing today again. But you welcomed me at Camp David at a time that was extremely difficult for Europe, because the whole issue then was, is the Eurozone strong enough? The Eurozone was riddled with doubt, and was it capable of dealing with such doubt? And your appeal to solidarity and to growth was tremendously useful at that time. And since that Camp David meeting, Europe, in fact, has left that financial crisis behind it and has equipped itself with instruments for stability and has introduced the banking union. I always will treasure memories of our encounter in Chicago, because I had announced to you at the time that France was withdrawing its fighters from Afghanistan. it wasn't a very easy decision to take or to understand, and yet you accepted it. We obviously decided to stay on in Afghanistan at a lower level, obviously, than we had decided ourselves in previous times. But you accepted that, all the more so as this was a commitment I had undertaken vis-à-vis the French voters, and it was very comparable to what you had also undertook vis-à-vis your voters concerning Iraq. Now, I'm not going to speak about the very warm welcome you gave me in Monticello, but today, let me pay tribute to the American unknown soldiers of World War II, to the veterans who made it possible for France and for Europe to regain their freedom. We are going to celebrate the 70th anniversary of D-Day. Earlier on today, I invited you to come and join us in June, on the 6th of June, and you have just accepted that invitation. That makes me very happy. It's going to be a highlight. It will be an opportunity to conjure up the memory and the sacrifice of that generation, and also their effort for peace, which brings us to our joint efforts today where security is concerned. France and the United States are two countries that share their calling because of their history, their track record, their status as members of the permanent members of the Security Council. Indeed, it's part of our calling to be leaders in the world for democracy, for freedom, for the respect of peoples. And this is what France has done with the support of the United States in Mali to fight terrorism and so as to enable Mali to regain its territorial integrity. This operation was successful, and that success was possible because there was a decision taken by the international community, because the Africans themselves participated, and there was support from the Europeans and from the United States of America. And today, our president has been elected in Mali, and the state is regaining its authority. France also intervened in the Central African Republic in an entirely different context, but to prevent what could have been a real humanitarian catastrophe. Already a great deal of violence had been wrought and weighed heavily on that suffering population. We haven't finished yet, obviously. We haven't overcome yet, because every single day there's new violence. But here again, France, with the Africans, with the support of the Europeans, and with the support of the United States, will overcome this situation in the end, which shows that we're living through rather exceptional times in the histories of our two countries. We've always been allied, we've always been friends, but today we have renewed confidence in each other. And this is what characterizes, I believe, the personal relationship you and I have, but also the objectives we jointly pursue. Barack Obama has insisted on our position on Syria. Indeed, we were ready to resort to force. We could have found another option, negotiation. We have made it possible for the partial destruction of the chemical stockpile to be obtained, but we haven't found the political solution yet. We have completed one stage, but we must continue the pressure, which is what we have decided. Cooperate even more. Our services must cooperate even more. Make sure that the alternative won't be on the one side a dictatorial regime and on the other chaos. Chaos brought about by the extremists and fundamentalists. This is what we're seeking, and this is what we will find. Also, we have come to an agreement on the Iranian problem, the Iranian issue, which seemed at first blush to be much more difficult, and is still difficult, obviously, to find a final solution there too. However, we've managed, obviously, to agree on the halting of the Iranian nuclear program. and strengthening, therefore, the relationship between France and the United States in this area. We continue also acting in the Middle East, and I have saluted the American initiative insofar as resuming the negotiations is concerned. Obviously, a framework agreement must be found now, and France and Europe will be there to support the finding of a solution between those two states. We're also tremendously attentive to what is happening in Lebanon. Lebanon is a country with which historically, traditionally, France has been linked. And here again, the US and France stand together so as to enable that country to cope with the tremendous inflow of refugees, with the attendant risks this involves, the possibility of a return to a civil war. We want to make sure that Lebanon in its unity and integrity is supported, just like we help Jordan to accommodate the influx of refugees. So we agree on all of these international issues. We agree and we converge. This doesn't mean, obviously, that we don't discuss things, because although we're friends and we're allies, there's still one principle we both respect, and that is the sovereignty of the other country. We also wish to work together economically. America is now regaining its growth strongly, and this has been thanks to the policy that has been led and to the US's increased faith in technology, low-cost energy, and some very bold decisions taken as well by the US leadership. This recovery of the American economy is a great opportunity for Europe, but it's also obviously a spur to us to give more room to the necessary competitive measures, but also to technology and innovation, which is the whole reason why I'm going to Silicon Valley tomorrow. And finally, with the United States, we, the Europeans, have agreed to get into a trade treaty in the best possible framework, i.e., open up markets, fight against non-tariff barriers, making sure that all companies can come in and compete with each other on a footing of equality. We obviously need here to preserve the interest of our countries. We all know about the mandate entrusted to the European Union, our own concern as regards cultural issues or agricultural issues, where we want to have a certain number of principles fully respected. However, we do wish to succeed in this partnership agreement. Why? Because this is also going to be an element in growth. The development of the world's trade, when it is balanced, is a precious element to stimulate entrepreneurial growth. Also, on climate change, we see eye to eye. Next year, France will be hosting a conference, not just for hotel or for hospitality reasons, for touristic reasons, but for really worldwide and humanitarian concerns, because there's a big danger. We want an agreement. We want it to be worldwide. We want it to be serious, and we want it to bring together all of the countries, developing the emerging countries, the poorer countries, together, pursuing a common goal. On food security, development, health, the fight against AIDS, we also have the same positions. Should we continue? Should I continue enumerating these subjects? Because on each one of them, I will underscore the agreement we have reached, even on the most delicate and more thorny issues. This is why I have talked about our past history. It binds us together. De Tocqueville is a reference, obviously. Always in France, we think about him in two areas. How far can you go in the area of equality? How far can you go in the area of freedom? And the calling of the revolutionaries, those who wanted the independence of the United States of America, those who wanted a republic to be established in France, what they were pursuing was precisely boldness in the area of freedom and respect in the area of equality. That is the stuff of which the American dream is made. It is also the stuff of which the French dream is made. And we look at it, obviously, through our own vantage points, but always nourishing the same ambition. Right, thank you very much.
I think we got a couple questions each. Let's start with, where's Mark Langley? There he is. New York Times.
The New York Times.
Good afternoon. Both of you talked about Syria a good deal in your opening remarks, and I wanted to ask a bit about that. The latest round of the Geneva II talks have proven to be as unproductive as the first round was. The chemical weapons agreement that you both alluded to has removed some weapons, but by all accounts it's a small fraction of the overall stockpile the Assad regime has, and the Syrians have missed a couple of deadlines. As I don't need to tell you, the Syrian regime is essentially starving thousands of Syrians in homes and elsewhere. Everybody agrees that more pressure needs to be brought to bear on the Assad regime to change this deadly equation. And so I wonder, beyond the general statements you made, what additional tangible steps did you discuss in your meetings today to help the moderate opposition to try to change that equation on the ground? And secondly, for Monsieur le Président, j'ai oublié la plupart de mon français, alors je pose cette question en anglais.
I forget my French, I'm going to ask in English.
How is it okay for a trade delegation with 100 French CEOs to travel to Tehran to explore business opportunities when the P5 and the E3+3 have committed to maintaining the strength and integrity of the sanctions regime? Thank you.
Why don't I take a stab first at the Syria question? We still have a horrendous situation on the ground in Syria. I don't think anybody disputes that. And what is absolutely clear is that with each passing day, more people inside of Syria are suffering. The state of Syria itself is crumbling. That is bad for Syria. It is bad for the region. It is bad for global national security, because what we know is that there are extremists who have moved into the vacuum in certain portions of Syria in a way that could threaten us over the long term. So this is one of our highest national security priorities, and I know that François feels the same way, and many of our European partners, as well as our partners in the region, feel the same way. The Geneva process recognizes that if we're going to solve this problem, then we have to find a political solution. And the first Geneva conference committed to a transition process that would preserve and protect the state of Syria, would accommodate the various sectarian interests inside of Syria so that no one party was dominant, and would allow us to return to some semblance of normalcy and allow all the people who've been displaced to start moving back in. We are far from achieving that yet. I would not completely discount the fact that in this latest round of negotiations, what you saw was a coherent, cohesive, reasonable opposition in the same room for the first time negotiating directly with the regime. Now, the regime, Assad's regime, wasn't particularly responsible. And I think even some of their patrons were disturbed by their belligerence. But we are going to continue to commit to not just pressure the Assad regime, but also to get countries like Russia and Iran to recognize that it is in nobody's interests to see the continuing bloodshed and collapse that's taking place inside that country. Now, you asked tangible steps that we can take. Both France and the United States continue to support a moderate opposition. We are continuing to provide enormous amounts of humanitarian aid. One of the problems we have right now is humanitarian access to deliver that aid. And as we speak today in the UN Security Council, we will be debating a resolution that would permit much greater access for humanitarian aid workers to get food, water, shelter, clothing, fuel to people who need it. Now, there is great unanimity among most of the Security Council on this resolution. Russia is a holdout, and Secretary Kerry and others have delivered a very direct message to the Russians that they cannot say that they are concerned about the well-being of the Syrian people when they are starving civilians, and that it is not just the Syrians that are responsible, the Russians as well, if they are blocking this kind of resolution. So that is an example of the kinds of diplomatic work that we are engaging in right now. But, Mark, nobody's going to deny that there's enormous frustration here. I think the underlying premise to the question may be, is there additional direct action or military action that can be taken that would resolve the problem in Syria? I have said throughout my presidency that I always reserve the right to exercise military action on behalf of America's national security interests. But that has to be deployed wisely. And I think that what we saw with respect to the chemical weapons situation was an example of the judicious, wise use of possible military action. In partnership with France, we said we would be prepared to act if Syria did not. Syria and Russia came to the conclusion that they needed to, for the first time, acknowledge the presence of chemical weapons and then agree to a very extensive deal to get those chemical weapons out. You're right that so far they have missed some deadlines. On the other hand, we've completely chronicled all the chemical weapons inside of Syria. A portion of those chemical weapons have been removed. There has been a reaffirmation by the Syrians and Russia that all of it has to be removed, and concrete steps are being taken to remove it. And we will continue to keep the pressure on, but we now have a UN mandate with consequences if there's a failure, something that we did not have before. Whether we can duplicate that kind of process when it comes to the larger resolution of the problem, right now we don't think that there is a military solution per se to the problem. But the situation's fluid, and we are continuing to explore every possible avenue to solve this problem, because it's not just heartbreaking to see what's happening to the Syrian people. It's very dangerous for the region as a whole, including friends and allies and partners like Lebanon or Jordan that are being adversely impacted by it. Let me just make one last comment with respect to the Iran sanctions. We have been extraordinarily firm that even during this interim agreement, we will fully enforce all applicable sanctions. In fact, we have taken various steps just over the last 6-7 weeks to identify companies that we felt were violating those sanctions, and have been very clear to the Iranians that there's not going to be any let-up. In discussions with President Hollande, he feels the same way, as do all the P5+1 members. And so businesses may be exploring, are there some possibilities to get in sooner rather than later, if and when there is an actual agreement to be had. But I can tell you that they do so at their own peril right now, because we will come down on them like a ton of bricks with respect to the sanctions that we control, and we expect full compliance with respect to the P5+1 during this interim. We don't want new sanctions because the ones we have in place are already squeezing around and brought them to the table. But we also want to send a message to the Iranians that if they don't resolve this broader issue of their nuclear program, that there will be consequences and that the sanctions regime not only will stay in place, but will likely be tightened in the event that these talks fail.
Barack has been very thorough, so I will now give you the French approach to the issues that have just been discussed. I'll be very brief. First of all, on Geneva II, the sole objective of this conference is political transition, obtaining political transition. The conference is not just to discuss humanitarian issues, but actually to move towards a political change, which sooner or later must take place in Syria. Now, we have urged the democratic opposition to attend the Geneva conference and to show that it was ready to undertake this approach. And admittedly, there's a party that is now blocking this conference, and that is the Syrian regime itself. Second observation, I dare say conclusion, is that we have to take humanitarian action. And this is why a resolution is proposed for adoption by the Security Council. And there again, we shall see who stands clearly on this issue of solving the Syrian problem, and who is in favor of humanitarian assistance. How can you be against humanitarian corridors? Why would you prevent taking a resolution if it's a matter of saving human lives in all good faith? So we have decided to take this issue to a head, to clarify it once and for all. Third, on the chemical weapons issue, Barack Obama and myself, once we had clear evidence that there had been use of chemical weapons by the regime, we envisaged resorting to force. And it is precisely because we had contemplated this that negotiation got started and that Putin took the position we all know. And the regime started a process of destruction of its chemical arsenal. But you're quite right. It is very time-consuming, it's very partial, and it is highly insufficient. But rules had been laid down, particularly within the framework of the Security Council resolution, in case of non-compliance. And we shall see to it that these rules are abided by. Everyone must know that all chemical weapons must be destroyed, and that there will be maximum pressure to obtain this. And then finally, it is our choice to support democratic opposition and to enable the democratic opposition to show itself as what it really is, that is to say, a democratic alternative for the future of Syria. And finally, an answer on French entrepreneurs' visit to Iran. For those of you who may not be well acquainted with the situation in France, the President of the Republic of France is not the President of the Employers Association of France. He does not claim to be so. And it also works the other way around, i.e., French companies move about the world freely as they wish to. However, I have told these French entrepreneurs that the sanctions regime is still on in Iran. And if contacts can be established as to what could be the Iranian position should Iran completely and finally choose to turn its back on nuclear weapons. Unless that is the case, there could be no commercial agreement. There goes my answer to you, and it seems to me that French companies are extremely well informed of my stand. As to the sanctions, they can only be lifted if there is a final agreement. And during the interim agreement, obviously, most of these sanctions remain enforced. A French question now, maybe? From
Figaro.
Le Figaro.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this warm welcome for the French nation and for taking our questions. You have actually praised France very warmly today and granted our president the first state visit of your second term. Does that mean that France has become the best European ally of the US and has replaced Great Britain?
Oh, goodness.
And in that role, and if so, why not extend to France the no spying agreement that you have with England after the big scandal of the NSA surveillance program? Et Monsieur le Président, vous avez loué aujourd'hui l'excellence de la coopération franco-américaine.
The excellency of the Franco-American cooperation. But on Iran, are there differences in terms of analysis between France and America on the necessity to have an ambitious agreement? Do you fear that Americans be prepared to make too many concessions? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I have two daughters, and they are both gorgeous and wonderful, and I would never choose between them. And that's how I feel about my outstanding European partners. All of them are wonderful in their own ways. Now, to the serious part of the question, what I do believe is that the U.S.-French alliance has never been stronger. And the levels of cooperation that we're seeing across a whole range of issues is much deeper than it was, I think, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that's good for France, it's good for the United States, it's good for the world. Because we share certain values and certain commitments and are willing to act on behalf of those commitments and values. With respect to the NSA, obviously, I expressed my strong commitment to making sure that our rules and how we approach intelligence and surveillance, not just here in the, not just with respect to any particular country, but worldwide, that we do it in a way that takes into account the incredible changes in technology and the new capacities that have evolved over the last several years. And the first place that we look to in terms of how do we make sure that our rules are compatible with our partnerships and our friendships and our alliances were countries like France that have been longtime allies of ours and some of our closest partners. It's not actually correct to say that we have a quote-unquote no spy agreement with Great Britain. That's not actually what happens. Well, we don't have, there's no country where we have a no spy agreement. We have, like every other country, an intelligence capability, and then we have a range of partnerships with all kinds of countries, and we've been in consultations with the French government to deepen those commitments. At the same time, what I've also said, both publicly and privately, and I want to reiterate today to the French press, is that we are committed to making sure that we are protecting and concerned about the privacy rights not just of Americans, not just of our own citizens, but of people around the world as well. That's a commitment, by the way, that's fairly unprecedented in terms of any country's intelligence operations. And what we've said is that we are putting rules in place so that we're not engaging in what some of the speculation has been when it comes to ordinary citizens in France. We are respectful of their privacy rights, and we are going to make sure that our rules are abiding by concerns about those privacy rights. We do remain concerned, as France is and as most of the EU is, with very specific potential terrorist networks that could attack us and kill innocent people. And we're going to have to continue to be robust in pursuit of those specific leads and concerns. But we have to do it in a way that is compatible with the privacy rights that people in France rightly expect, just like they do here in the United States. And the last point, just because I know you asked it of President Hollande, but I want to go ahead and comment on this. The reason Iran's at the table is because we have a very high threshold in terms of what we expect out of Iran to prove to us that they're not pursuing nuclear weapons. And we were able to stitch together an international coalition to apply sanctions to make sure that would be the case. I don't think the concern during the course of these negotiations is whether or not we are going to be making too many concessions. I think the concern is going to be whether or not Iran can recognize the opportunity to prove in a verifiable fashion to the world in ways that scientists and technical experts can confirm that any nuclear program they have is for peaceful purposes. And the facts are what will guide these negotiations. If they meet what technically gives us those assurances, then there's a deal to be potentially made. If they don't, there isn't. And it's not subject to a whole lot of interpretation. There are some judgment issues involved, but part of the reason we're where we are right now is because Iran hasn't been able to give those assurances to anybody in the international community that they weren't pursuing a nuclear weapon. That's why there was such unanimity in applying the sanctions and keeping them in place.
In response to your first question, well, I have 4 children, so that makes it even more difficult.
Mais nous ne prétendons pas à un statut particulier. Il y a ce que je disais de l'histoire, ce que je pense de nos valeurs.
Remember what I was telling you about history and our values and our areas of convergence. Joint history, joint values, jointly shared values.
Car l'amitié franco-américaine, elle n'est pas simplement.
It's not a matter of establishing a pecking order. Franco-American friendship is reinforcing our links collectively, personally, tighter bonds between our two societies, sharing technology. Yes, indeed, but more than this. The meaning of Franco-American friendship is that it can offer values to the rest of the world, and particularly with this particular French presidency and this particular American presidency.
Nous avons voulu, nous, travailler comme les États-Unis dans le cadre du P5.
We, like the United States, have wanted to work within the framework of the P5 on the issue of Iran. That is the framework for our action. There can be bilateral contacts. I also, personally, during the General Assembly of the United Nations, met with the president of Iran. So it's really, it's only legitimate that there can be face-to-face contacts. But we must stand together in negotiations firmly and strongly so as to be able to succeed in this interim agreement. And we haven't finished, because it would be a mistake to think that since there is an interim agreement for a few months, there's no longer a nuclear issue with Iran. Of course not. We have to remain steadfast so as to make sure that Iran does completely give up nuclear weapons. On the NSA question, the question wasn't put to me, but President Obama answered. So let me give you an answer myself, even though I could perhaps be more specific if you put another question to me about this. After Snowden's revelations, President Obama and myself took a lengthy look at our past together and decided to make sure that our cooperation would fight terrorism, but at the same time comply with a certain number of principles. And we're making headway in this area. And there is mutual confidence that has been restored. And that must be founded both on the respect of each other for our countries, but must also be founded on respect of intimacy, of private intimacy, of what is known as personal data. That is to say that in spite of technological progress, people can be sure that they're not under surveillance. And we do agree.
National Public Radio.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, yesterday your administration again delayed the ACA employer mandate for mid-sized companies. Last week, your economic advisor, Jason Furman, talked about the new choices that people have to find health care outside the workplace. I wonder if you could first explain the delay and then also talk about whether over the long term you see a future where health insurance is less tied to the workplace.
Well,
if I may, for President Hollande. You both talked about the pursuit of the transatlantic trade agreement. I wonder if you have followed the domestic battle here over fast-track authority and if that raises questions in your mind about whether such a deal could be ratified.
You know, the announcement yesterday was fairly straightforward. The overwhelming majority of firms in this country already provide health insurance to their employees and are doing the right thing. The small percentage that do not, many of them are very small and are already exempted by law. So you have just this small category of folks who don't provide health insurance, weren't exempted by law. They are supposed to make sure that they meet their responsibilities so that their employees aren't going to the emergency room, jacking up everybody else's costs, and the employers end up not having any responsibility for that. What we did yesterday was simply to make an adjustment in terms of their compliance, because for many of these companies, just the process of complying, they're mid-size, between 50 and 100 folks, it may take them some time even if they're operating in good faith. And we want to make sure that the purpose of the law is not to punish them, it's simply to make sure that they are either providing health insurance to their employees or that they're helping to bear the costs of their employees getting health insurance. And that's consistent, actually, with what we've done in the individual mandate. The vast majority of Americans want health insurance. Many of them couldn't afford it. We provide them tax credits. But even with the tax credits, in some cases, they still can't afford it, and we have hardship exemptions, phase-ins, to make sure that nobody is unnecessarily burdened. That's not the goal. The goal is to make sure that folks are healthy and have decent health care. And so this was a example of administratively us making sure that we're smoothing this transition, giving people the opportunities to get right with the law, but recognizing that there are going to be circumstances in which people are trying to do the right thing and it may take a little bit of time. Our goal here is not to punish folks. Our goal is to make sure that we've got people who can count on the financial security that health insurance provides. And where we've got companies that want to do the right thing and are trying to work with us, we want to make sure that we're working with them as well. And that's going to be our attitude about the law generally. How do we make it work for the American people and for their employers in an optimal sort of way? What was the second part of that healthcare question? Long term, in terms of employer base. Well, look, we have a unique system compared to many parts of the world, including France, where partly because of historical accident and some decisions that FDR made during wartime back in World War II, our healthcare has been much more tied to employers. That's not the case in most other developed countries. It has worked for a long time, but what is also true is that it has meant for a lot of U.S. companies a greater burden, more costs relative to their international competitors. That's a challenge. It's also meant that folks who were self-employed, for example, or independent contractors weren't always getting the same deal as somebody who had a job. It meant that folks who worked for small businesses sometimes had more trouble getting decent premiums and decent rates than folks with large companies. So it just created a great amount of unevenness in the system. I don't think that an employer-based system is going to be or should be replaced anytime soon. But what the Affordable Care Act does do is it gives people some flexibility. It says if I'm working at a big company like IBM or Google and I decide I want to start my own company, that I'm not going to be inhibited from starting a new company because I'm worried about keeping health insurance for myself and my family. I can go make that move. If I'm a woman who's and I'd really like to work with them on the farm, but we can't afford health insurance on our own, so I've been working at the county clerk's office for the last 10 years. Now maybe I've got the opportunity to no longer work in a different job and instead work on that farm and increase the likelihood of economic success for my family. So it's giving people more flexibility and more opportunity to do what makes sense for them. And ultimately, I think that's going to be good for our economy. But we understood from the start that there were going to be some challenges in terms of transition. When you've had one system where a whole lot of people did not have any health insurance whatsoever for a very long period of time, and we finally passed a law to fix that. We knew that there were going to be some bumps and transitions in that process, and that's what we're working with all the stakeholders involved to address. Oh, you had a
Le traité commercial.
There was a question also that had been put regarding the trade partnership agreement.
Nous avons parlé avec le président Obama.
When we wanted this to get off the ground.
Également au Congrès.
Well,
pour nous, dès lors que les principes sont fixés,
President Obama and I believe that if the principles are clear, if the terms of reference for it are clear, if the interests involved are clear, moving forward fast is no problem. We have everything to gain in moving forward rapidly. Otherwise, we know that sooner or later there will be irritation, there will be some threats, there will be some people having second thoughts. So if we're all in good faith, if we all show resolve, if we're all attached to growth, as seems to me is the case, we can move forward very fast. Mr. Bost, I think you have a question. Since last year, foreign investment in France has been going down, and our country is not enjoying the benefit of world growth. Sir, during this visit, you'll be meeting with American entrepreneurs, but for them, you're a socialist, taxing business to the tune of 70%. So how are you going to build trust among American business leaders? And the French business leaders themselves, Mr. Gattaz, yesterday said in Washington that there would be no countervailing measures.
Reporters have something in common in France and the United States. you know, I think...
Lesquels?
These would be? Which one would these be?
You know, I think that all of us were traumatized by the crisis of 2007, 2008. And, you know, the United States has to take responsibility for its role in that crisis. We made some quick decisions that allowed us to stabilize the financial markets and begin the long process of recovery, but it was painful, it was slow, and you know, it was only because of the incredible resilience of the American people and our businesses, as well as, I believe, some well-timed policies, that we were able to begin a growth process that we've now sustained for some time, and we've brought our unemployment rate down. But you know, Europe has a different set of challenges because of the Eurozone, because of the nature of the shared currency, but not completely shared governance and supervisory authorities. You know, that has created some particular difficulties that François and others have had to deal with that we did not have to deal with as a country with a reserve currency that could make some independent choices. Despite that, I think Europe actually has made enormous strides over the last year. France, in particular, has taken some tough structural reforms that I think you know, are going to help them be more competitive in the future. You know, I think all of us in the developed world are having to balance the need for growth and competitiveness, to be what we say in America, lean and mean, and make sure that we are maximizing efficiency as well as innovation, but also do it in a way that allows for the benefits of growth to be broad-based, and so that workers are all benefiting from some sense of security and decent wages and rising incomes and the ability to retire securely. And so each country is going to have different circumstances. The kinds of reforms we need in this country right now revolve around things like investing in infrastructure, where you know, we have not made the kind of strides that I would like us to see and would actually boost growth even faster. We're going to have to invest in skills training, which every country is going to have to do, because businesses will locate where they think they've got the most capable, most highly skilled workers. We still have to do more on the innovation front. As innovative as we are, I think we're still underinvesting in research and development. So America has some inherent strengths, but we also have some areas where we've got to make progress. And I think François would be the first to say that France is in the same position. I would certainly encourage American companies to look at opportunities for investment in France. I'd encourage them even more to look at opportunities to invest money back in the United States. And I would welcome any French companies who want to come here to do business. But one of the great things about our commercial relationship, which is also part of the reason why I think the transatlantic trade partnership could be valuable, is a lot of the growth is in small and medium-sized businesses. And they are the ones who could stand to benefit greatly from export. They don't have the ability to decide where to invest. They're going to be in their home countries. If we can open up trade opportunities for them, because they don't have a lot of lawyers, they don't have a lot of accountants, they can't move locations and open up new plants in different places. If we expand trade opportunities for them, that can mean jobs and growth in France. It can mean jobs and growth here in the United States. And so I'm hopeful that we can get this deal, which will be a tough negotiation, but I'm confident we can actually get it done.
France is one of the countries in the world that gets most investment coming from the outside world. One of the countries in the world that is more open to foreign capital. So France is attractive, and I want this attractiveness to be even further reinforced in the future. If I look at the level of physical investment, i.e. real investment, not financial purely, not just transferring from company to company, but real, physical, tangible investment in France, i.e. companies and new jobs. Well, in spite of the crisis, in 2013, we've kept to that level of investment, which shows that there is confidence in France and in France's talent and in France's know-how and in France's companies. And there's nothing new here. There are more than 2,000 American companies in France, with jobs for 500,000 people in my country. And the U.S. remains one of the first foreign investors in France. And I hope that this will be even boosted in the future. And Barack is right. I have nothing to fear from French investment here in France. There are 2,700 French companies here in the United States, and offering also some 500,000 jobs, and not all of them in Silicon Valley, but all over the United States. And when they're creative people and they're talented people coming from France, investing in the United States the other way around, it's pretty good for both economies. I don't have this protecting vision, which would mean we're going to sue all the business people who go abroad because they will be exporting our technology. Of course not. On condition that one day they come back, obviously. This is why we want to remain very attractive. Soon, I will be inviting many foreign companies to what I call an attractiveness council, so that they can see what we have to propose, but also what we have to get better in France, how we have to improve in France, also including the area of tax stability, since this is one of the issues that is often mentioned, or the stability of rules, because what companies want is visibility into the future, obviously. But the foreign companies in France, well, go and ask them. Ask them whether they want to remain or not, and whether they want to invest in France or not. And they do so because they find in France a particularly welcoming country. You also put a question to me on a statement made by Mr. Gattaz, the president of the French Business Association, on what I call the Pact of Responsibility. That noise has nothing whatsoever to do with the declaration made by Mr. Gattaz.
You're watching live images from the East Room of the White House. Barack Obama in the company of François Hollande, part of a state visit by the French president to Washington. A little bit later on, François Hollande will be at the State Department in the company of the U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry. With us to talk about it all, Socialist Member of Parliament Axel Lemaire, who was telling us before the show that you were supposed to be part of the visit.
But you were not supposed to say it.
Oh.
Yes.
But for personal reasons, you were unable to go. Oh,
you know everything.
Oh, well. Also with us, Jacques Millard, also a member of Parliament.
Fortunately, I was not invited.
From, as you can see, from the other side of the aisle, from the Conservative UMP party. Philip Golub, who teaches at the American University of Paris, and Judah Grunstein, who's the man responsible for all you'll find at World Politics Review. Thanks for being with us, all of you. The beginning of this press conference, we heard the U.S. president and the French president talk about something that they mentioned when they penned a joint letter, which was a joint letter in which they talked about